The Count 2014, an Illinois campaign and election media project. Funding provided in part by the Illinois Education Association, taking charge of the profession. Online at ieanea.org.
I'm Jamey Dunn with Illinois Issues Magazine. We're here at the Illinois State Fair with the Count 2014. And with me today is Bernie Schoenburg with the State Journal-Register. Bernie, thanks for being here.
Fun to be here, Jamie.
And Ray Long with the Chicago Tribune. Ray, thanks for being here.
Good to be here, Jamie.
It's a nice day to be here. So the State Fair is a big political stage, at least 2 days of it, for the parties to kind of show off their platforms and their candidates. Bernie, why is this an important day for the folks that are seeking office and for the parties?
Well, it's just like the national conventions on a little level. Some people say, they've run their course, we know who the candidates are going to be. Even in those situations, it's good for the party faithful to hear some rah-rah information from their leaders, why it's good to be a member of the party, what we stand for, where we're going from here. It's funny, this year in Illinois, of course, we have undetermined races because people don't file for election until late this year, and then the March primary. Well, for governor, we're going to have races in both parties, with Pat Quinn, the Democrat, being taken on by Bill Daley. They both appeared at an event at a hotel yesterday because there wasn't the traditional rally here at the fairgrounds. But you do have two candidates able to present their case to a lot of members of the party. There were like 1,300 people at a breakfast sponsored by the Democratic County Chairman's Association. And here today, candidates spoke in the morning at a hotel where the State Central Committee and the County Chairman's Association on the Republican side were meeting. And then the party faithful here could get some food and some beer if they wanted. And also hear speeches, at least from the main candidates, including 4 candidates for governor. And let's see: Kirk Dillard, Bruce Rahner, Dan Rutherford, and Bill Brady, who represents actually the fairgrounds as part of his district coming down from Bloomington. So there wasn't too much. There was a little bit of tension yesterday, the Daley Quinn thing, just a couple of slight barbs. Mostly Democrats are good and we need to move the state forward. The Republicans, again, some little bitty barbs between people, but mostly it's that we've got to end one-party rule as the Democrats have had for a decade in Illinois, and look how terrible things are in the state. So it's good for the party faithful.
Well, Ray, we didn't see a couple of the important folks on both sides. Speaker Madigan was not around yesterday. We didn't see House Minority Leader Tom Cross today. Why? I mean, we don't really know for sure why they didn't show, but why might they not have shown?
Well, let's take the Democrats first. House Speaker Michael Madigan does not really need to show up because his presence is felt. Secondly, he did not need to show up because he wasn't required to show up to a county chairman's function. It was a breakfast that Bernie was talking about. And his presence was missed, obviously. They even noted it from the podium, saying he sends his regards and his regrets. But there have been some problems over the summer where he's been kind of a lightning rod. One of those is a patronage scandal up in one of the transit systems called Metra in the Cook County area. And it has brought in the question of whether he put pressure on the leaders of the transit system to try to help some of his people out through a raise, through maybe a job, etc. And so he also came into an intra-family situation with his daughter, Lisa Madigan. She's the Attorney General of the state, of course, and what we saw there was her saying that she's going to run for re-election at a time when she had a big war chest, and a lot of people thought that she could be gearing up to run for governor. A lot of people wanted her to run for governor. But when she said she wasn't going to, she put out a statement that said the public would not be quote-unquote well served by having a governor and a speaker from the same family. Well, she had been telling everybody she was seriously considering for a long time running for governor, and she had no signal apparently that her father was going to give this up, the House speakership or the party chairmanship for that matter. So it became curious that she said she had never intended to do this at a time when she had been telling people she was seriously considering it. It raised questions of whether she was just kind of pulling people along to bring in those contributions while she was not really intending to run for governor all along. In fact, Speaker Madigan said about a week or so after she put out the statement that she knew I wasn't running. She knew.
Or that he wasn't stepping down, you mean?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That he wasn't stepping down.
Yeah,
From
she knew that I was going to intend to stay Speaker.
Right.
Oh,
And as far as Tom Cross, the House Minority Leader, there are a couple of things going on there. He's in a big fight internally in his caucus in the House. Some people would like to see him step down. Some people don't believe that he is backing away from statewide desires, and they believe that he may be a guy who still has his eye on part of this Republican statewide ticket, and that is a point of dissension in the caucus. They believe that they need somebody totally focused on re-electing or electing more Republicans.
Of course, the announcement today was that it was a family matter that kept him up north. That's
Right.
what Jack Dorgan, the Republican Party chairman, said. So I didn't have any further detail, although I'm aware of some of the dissension you speak of.
Right. Now,
Well, Bernie, we're not seeing a lot of hard stances from people yet, but it seems like candidates are working to position themselves, like Governor Quinn is kind of pushing these populist ideas. And tell us a little bit about how Quinn and Daley are positioning themselves as we're heading into the race.
What Governor Quinn is doing, and it was funny because at the county chairman's breakfast in Springfield, 1,300 people, a lot of state employees and also a lot of people who have, been tilling the party fields the same 30 years or more that Pat Quinn has. So his reception was pretty good. He talked a lot about what a terrible situation it was when he had to take over the governorship from Rod Blagojevich, and how he then quickly passed a capital plan that allowed bridges and roads to be resurfaced or built all over the state, or fixed, and talked a lot about things like that as a governor he's been able to do these things. Did push a little bit in his speech on pension reform, which he's been, that's his big point of contention with the legislature right now. He actually vetoed out their salaries from the budget, saying you're not going to get paid until we pass pension reform, which he's been trying to get for a couple of years.
in fact, Bernie said he was put on earth to get that pension
and I think
reform.
he was going to work night and day, as he always says near the end of an election too. But so he was talking accomplishments. He was talking about the good things Democrats do and stand for. Interestingly, on social issues, he and then Bill Daley, the former U.S. Commerce Secretary, the former Chief of Staff to President Obama, he gave a speech. He read the speech. It was not quite as fluid as Pat Quinn has become in this, this was not necessarily his crowd, but Bill Daley hasn't been to Springfield a whole lot, but being, I guess, the brains behind, his brother Rich's campaigns for mayor in Chicago, and Ray, correct me if I'm wrong, being the Tribune guy here, and also, having been chief of staff for President Obama, clearly also been with, is it AT&T, in the corporate world, obviously has run major organizations and campaigns, knows a lot of stuff. This is the first time now that his brother is not mayor anymore that he feels that he can pull the trigger and has pulled the trigger to run for governor, as he had talked about before but never really did. So it was his first foray. He again, both of those candidates are for gay marriage, for example, same-sex marriage, and they talk a lot about economic freedom and the importance of unions. So they don't disagree all that much. It may come down to, Pat Quinn is ineffective according to Daley. Daley, is tied to the old Chicago machine according to Quinn, who has fought that machine all that time. So that's the Democratic side. I don't know if we want me to continue on with the Republican side, but maybe Ray can take on the Republican side.
The Republican side. We're seeing a lot of familiar faces and then one new person that's a bit of an outsider. Can you tell us a little bit, the case they're trying to make is how they can win it all for the Republicans. So what are they saying about that?
Sure. It became kind of an interesting scenario here because you had Bill Brady, who is a state senator from Bloomington that Bernie was talking about. He came in and said, I lost the last race to Governor Quinn narrowly, but I think I can build on that foundation and take the mansion this time around. And then you have Kirk Dillard, who lost to Brady last time in the primary by only 193 votes, telling everybody, you know what, every vote counts and you need to get out there, and I'm the guy who, if I survive a primary, has the best shot at really winning a general election. That's because he said he can work with Democrats. But it was interesting that he would raise how he could work with Democrats, because that's also one of his biggest negatives, in the sense that he cut a commercial back in 2008 before 2008 caucus in Iowa that helped Barack Obama. And so he raised kind of an issue that he probably didn't want to, just by talking about how he can work with Democrats. And then we have another person who has won a statewide office. This is Dan Rutherford. He's state treasurer, and he makes that point. Look, I'm the only guy running here who has actually won statewide before, and so I should be the guy who gets it. I can reach out to different communities. So you talked about Sikh, Asian, Polish, all kinds of different communities in Chicago, and African Americans. And so he says, I'm the guy who can bring a big melting pot. I can get the slice of Chicago, 20% of the vote that a Republican will need to win. And so those three are established Republicans in this state. People know who they are. And then we've got a guy named Bruce Rahner, who wouldn't answer questions about almost anything. He came riding up on a motorcycle to the breakfast of party leaders, and then he wouldn't answer whether he would support a mandatory motorcycle helmet law in Illinois. And he wouldn't support a lot of the typical types of questions that you get asked when you're running for office either. So he's sticking on message. He's got lots of money. He's already spending lots of money, and he is trying to position himself as a guy who can withstand any charge from any amount of money that the Democrats can throw at him.
Which is interesting too, because Rahner has also contributed a lot of money to some Democrats, including Rahm Emanuel, the mayor of Chicago. So
right.
That is what some of the more party line Republicans are upset about, that here's this guy who has donated to, he also donated to former Pennsylvania Governor Ed Rendell. He says it's about education, but one of his companies was also doing business with retirement funds from that state at the time, and he donated to Ed Rendell, who also became chairman of the Democratic National Committee for a time. So, he's saying he's a good Republican, but he also won't say what his view is on something like same-sex marriage, which some platform Republicans do not like and want to be against. And he says something like, we need to have a referendum in Illinois. Well, of course, we know that there are no binding referenda on such matters under our Constitution in the state, although there could be an advisory referendum, and he might follow that, going by the logic. But he is really trying to avoid those tough questions, or even untough questions like a motorcycle helmet law, which is a big issue in Illinois because the motorcycle riders have fought helmet laws strongly, and they put out a lot of political signs, a group of them called ABATE. They're just a political force, and most Republicans say they're against the helmet law in the name of personal freedom. Rahner would not even say that today.
But he did mention that he's very interested in term limits. Bernie, how will that go over with folks? That's like the one thing that he's really getting behind at this point.
Yeah, I think in order to impose the kind of term limits that he wants, and I think he talked about 8 years for pretty much everybody at the state level, legislators on up, it's a populist view. I think, again, it would be hard to get the legislature to put that on the ballot, and it might not be hard to get people to vote for it, but it's pie in the sky. A lot of legislators, Congress people, John Shimkus is one of them from Illinois, who have run saying, I will term limit myself. They don't. They end up realizing that once you get there, you want to stay. So it's a good populist issue. It may win him a few points, but I'm not sure how much traction that gets him, just because the history of it in this state is such that people who have claimed they will self-impose haven't done it, and it just doesn't look like it's going to happen. It sounds more like the kind of promise you hear from a new guy.
Well, let's talk some more issues. Bernie, the State Journal Register had an interesting story with the Better Government Association looking at some of the hiring practices at IDOT. Is this going to be an issue for Quinn? It almost looks like it could be the beginning of a scandal unrolling, possibly.
We'll see where that one goes. The story that the Better Government Association produced did say that the Executive Inspector General's office has been interviewing people about that, and that potentially hundreds of people have been put in jobs where they didn't necessarily do what the job description was, but the descriptions were formed in such a way that they avoided some of the anti-patronage rules that the Supreme Court imposed years ago with the Rutan decision. So we will see where that will go. Quinn, of course, just said it's good for the Inspector General to do all this. I've done nothing wrong, and hopefully my people have done nothing wrong, but let's let the light of day come and see it. Bill Daley's campaign already immediately put out a copy of that story, just in case you missed it. One of those links, as all campaigns do now, with any story that can reflect negatively on their opponents. We did not hear the Republicans talking about that today. They have a little bit of patronage in their background as well, but my guess is it depends where it goes. If we hear more specifics, if anybody starts getting indicted, obviously that would become then a much bigger campaign issue. So there are several
Ray,
months
and while
even
all this
before the
politicking
primary,
is going on,
so
there is
we
a
will see
special
if any of
committee
that
trying to work out pension reform, trying to work out a compromise that both chambers can pass. How important is pension reform for Quinn to get done? How does that play into the election?
Well, it's a great and fascinating issue right now, Jamie, because not only is the state the worst funded state pension reform system in the nation, but we've got a guy in charge of that committee named Kwame Raoul who's considering whether he should run for governor. And so he wants to get this done, and he wants to look like a guy who can pull the warring factions together. And he may be the guy who can pull the warring factions together, but he says he doesn't want to decide whether he runs for governor until he gets this pension reform on a path toward getting a recommendation before the legislature. He says he thinks that could happen before October 22nd when they come back for veto session. They may come in early. And so you may see another guy come in here and really throw the dynamics of the Democratic gubernatorial race up for grabs.
Well, we're going to wrap things up, but Bernie, here at the end, just real quickly, what can we expect through the rest of this year from campaigning? People will be filing. Will we see a lot of ads? What should folks be watching?
I think one of the key things that we'll see, and that it's a new layer of things happening in Illinois that didn't happen before, and it happened partly because of the 2010 race when you had an unknown candidate who spent a lot of money and who had a troubled past, Scott Lee Cohn, who won the nomination for lieutenant governor. And then was kind of forced to resign and made us think about it, but did step off the ballot. This year, under new law passed since then by our legislature, each candidate for governor, when they file before the end of the year, they're going to have to file as a team with someone they say will be their lieutenant governor. So if all 6 candidates we have now stay in the race, they will each have to have a running mate that will be named on the petition that they will start circulating in September. So announcements of running mates and then seeing how those teams work together will be a whole new ball game that we've never seen in Illinois in the 30-some years that Ray and I have been watching this stuff. So that will be interesting, and that will be one of those engines that will create announcements and create more opportunities that even if they weren't going to have press releases or announcements, this will be something that will kind of color the rest of the year until filing time.
Well, Bernie, Ray, thank you for your time. And, we've got some time until the 2014 election, but keep checking in with the Count 2014 and we'll keep you up to date.
Funding provided in part by the Illinois Education Association, taking charge of the profession. Online at IEANEA.org.